Please welcome to the stage Tom Gaynor, Mike Heaton, Andrew Crowley, Jeremy Noble, and Brian Costanzo.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, it's great to have a crowd like this come out today. We're over 2,000 people, setting a new record, and I like the smiles that I see on people's faces. I know you'll follow the tradition of coming back next year and bringing a friend with you. So thank you so much for being here. Now, before we get started with the questions and your part of the meeting, I think you can all recognize and realize that a meeting like this does not happen by itself. There were a lot of people who spent a lot of hours and did a lot of work and a lot of dedication to bring this about, and I do want to thank a few of them, and I know there's more that I can't get to, so please I apologize for my omissions, but let me try to do the best I can to thank many of you who made this all happen. First off, Tyler Brown, my partner. Tyler, where are you? Oh, yeah, you're back there. So sorry. So Tyler works with me on equity investments. As we started to create the annual meeting and trying to make it a more substantial thing, Tyler really took ownership of this, coined the name, the Reunion, and it's really the intellectual godfather of this. So we all owe Tyler a great round of thanks for that. Matt Johnson, who you just heard from, well, Matt Johnson is, as Linda would say, Matt Johnson. I won't say anything more. He does it all. Event planning, we actually have a business that has a number of events, so we have someone who captains that, and that's Cynthia Green. And Cynthia runs the show on this as well. And her team of Gretchen Nurnberg, Sarah Westfall, and Kara Mountain just make all the logistics happen, and I have my gratitude for that. Also, there's another set of people, and I don't have individual names, but this is just the vibe I've been picking up over the last couple of days. So it's been going on for a while, but for instance, yesterday at the walk run, for those of you who were there was someone who had put up signs for where we were down at the War Memorial. There was someone directing you to parking. There was somebody directing you to the registration tent. There was somebody handing you the bib. There was somebody handing you a cup of coffee and the donuts. And you know what? They were all volunteers. They were all people of Markel who just said, yeah, how can we help? We want to be part of this too. So the people checking you in at the desks up there, all the people around who are just bending over backward to help you, all of that was done on a completely volunteer, extra hours basis by the people of your company. So those of you who volunteered in any way, shape, or form, would you please stand up and let us recognize you and thank you? I know a number of you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank my partner, Mike Heaton, who helped me set the goal and create the system to make the goal a reality of making the process of the Markel Reunion be as it is. And I want to thank the ninjas who spend their time with us every day, and life would not work without them. And the ninjas are Shannon Martin, Christina Matisse, and Cynthia Fetterman, our assistants, and they make everything work. Thank you, ladies. And by the way, that is a technical title, so we're proud to have so. Today, this meeting, we have people from 22 countries who've come and joined us today. So thank you so much for coming. That's a new, we haven't been keeping records, but I'm going to safely pronounce that as a new record. We have people, yeah, thank you all for coming. We have people from 45 states who are here, so we're closing in on the certainly it would be a majority. 45 states, 22 countries. We're glad you're here. Hope to make this meeting worthwhile for you. I'm going to start off before we get to the Q&A. There are 3 slides I would like to review with you for a moment. So if you could pull up the first slide. Thank you. All right, this is our very key highlight of our first quarter results. And you know, one of the things that I tried to write about in the annual report this year and make sure that people get an increasing understanding is the question of, you know, what is Markel worth, and how do you think about the value of this business and the value of a share of Markel stock? And I just want to try to share with you some brief numbers to try to give you a picture of how it is that we think about it. So if you think about any time we make any money at all, any dollar of profit that we have, there are basically two things in general that we can do with it. Well, three, but we'll get to that. So the first thing that we can do is we can invest it. And we can invest it in a public security. Sometimes it's an equity, sometimes that's a bond. But we have a publicly traded portfolio of equities, bonds, fixed income instruments. And you can see that March 31, the end of the first quarter a year ago, that was $24 billion. It's now $28 billion. So during the course of the past year, year over year, that total grew $4 billion. So one of the things that, and that's a 17% increase year over year. If you take that number and you subtract out all the debt that we have, you get a net investments that the company has, and you can divide that by the number of shares that we have. And as you're an owner of a common share of stock, as long as two things are true, and those two things are that we operate our insurance and ventures businesses profitably, so a combined ratio of less than 100 and net profitability, and that we don't shrink, the complete and total earnings from those investments accrue to you as the shareholders, 100 cents on the dollar. So that is the first component of value, and that's one of the ways I would think about what a share of Markel is worth. Second thing I would think about is we can invest dollars and pounds and other currencies into operating businesses. We've had an insurance business for over 100 years. We had Markel Ventures businesses that started in 2005. Those businesses tend to be best described by their income statement and the cash that they make, not so much the balance sheet. So the way that I think any thoughtful analyst would go about that task is you would look at the operating income, which is essentially the pre-tax income of what those businesses are making. So that doesn't include any investment returns whatsoever. Those are dollars of underwriting profits, dollars of operating profit from our ventures businesses, our ILS business, our insurance services business. And I would add those two up, and I would annualize them to some degree, and then I would put a multiple on it. And you can pick any reasonable multiple you want. It doesn't make any difference, really, if you're thinking about what the rate of change is over time. 8, 10, 12, something like that is a number that I would use, and I would keep that number consistent. I would not change it year by year. And we've tracked that number all the way back to the IPO of 1986. Now, it just so happens that in the first quarter of this year, the insurance engine was down a bit, the ventures engine was up a bit, so that total number, doesn't change that much. But that's just a quarter. And then if you could go to the second slide, the second slide is where these numbers start to become more meaningful. And we measure ourselves and hold ourselves accountable, not to quarter by quarter progress, although we like quarter by quarter progress, but that's not the way we steered the ship. That'd be like trying to drive a car by looking at the hood ornament rather than the road. So looking at the road we use and the length we hold ourselves accountable for is 5 years at a time. And if you look over the 5-year period of time, that pool of investments has grown from 16 change to 27 and change $1 billion, which is a compound annual growth rate of 11%. And if you look at the operating income, that's where you can kind of see it clearly over a 5-year period. The 5-year bucket has grown from 813 to 2.5 billion. The ventures, 573 million to 1.7 billion. Those are both 25% growth rates over the last 5 years. These are really good results, and that's how I would think about how to financially measure and check all of the things you've heard about the style and values and qualitative. Well, it does come down to being measured by numbers, and these are the numbers that I would look at to check and see how we are doing. And then the third slide, this here brings up the third thing we can do with money. So we, in addition to putting it in an investment portfolio or expanding this or buying a new Markel Ventures acquisition or insurance acquisition. The other thing we could do is we can sort of do that math and think about what each share of stock is worth on an intrinsic basis. And if we think the intrinsic value is meaningfully higher than the market price, we can buy in our own stock. We started doing that in a measurable way, probably in 20, and then in 21 and 22 and 23, you've seen the pace of repurchase activity pick up, and we've taken the total number of shares outstanding from 14 million down to less than 13 million over the last couple of years. So combine the last slide with this slide, you're looking at a business that has more investments per share, has more profitability per share, in any kind of way you mention it, and it's being divided by fewer shares. So if we keep going at the rate we went last year, in 30 years, we'll be down to 1 share, and I think that should be worth a bunch. We probably won't get there, but we will do our best to approach it if that's the rational and reasonable thing to do. All right, so at this point, this meeting is now all about you, and it's your meeting, and we're here to answer your questions. And for a meeting like this to work, we desire, we solicit your questions. Please keep it short, keep it polite, have it meet Alan's test of the old-time values and kindness, but tough and fair. We have 2 question stations on either side. We also have Tyler back in the back, because as you all registered, there was the opportunity for you to write down a question that you wanted us to address. Now, as Tyler collected that, he did not share any of those with us. I wanted to honor the idea that any question would come at us fresh. So there's no script, there's no charts, there's no presentations. These are fresh questions. We'll rotate Tyler in and out compared to audience questions, but again, we encourage you to queue over there. We have our first question, and I want to say the first question, even though I don't know what the question is, I do know who the questioner is. And he is my friend Jeff Stacey, who's joining us from Toronto, Canada. Jeff is someone who met in Omaha many 30 probably plus years ago. Been a loyal Markel shareholder, a knowledgeable investor, runs a firm up in Canada. We have a tradition of doing a brunch out in Omaha, where for a couple of years there was some guy off to my left who was the same guy, and he was waving and trying to get recognized, and apparently I don't see out as well as my left as I do on my right. So I never recognized him, and for a while I gave that gentleman the honor of asking the first questions. That gentleman is no longer with us, but Jeff has picked up the baton and has asked first questions in Omaha, and now doing so in Richmond. So with that, Jeff, you have the first questions, and when you get the microphone, if you would state your name, if you're a Markel shareholder, perhaps how long you've been a shareholder. If not, that's okay. We're hoping by the end of the day you'll fix that, and where you're from. But Jeff, to you.
I am indeed Jeff Stacey. I'm a Markel shareholder for 25 years. So Tom, I want to start by thanking you and your colleagues for this wonderful reunion of events. Over the years, I've built some very enduring friendships and business relationships from attending the various Markel events, and in my experience, it's very rare in business and very special. So congratulations and well done to you and your colleagues. My question is about the 3-engine architecture of insurance, investments, and Markel Ventures. For the 2023 year, Markel reported record comprehensive income. And that was powered primarily last year by investments in Markel Ventures. Underwriting, insurance, while profitable, was below the company's expectations. I was somewhat baffled when you released these results that the share price dropped sharply despite reporting, record comprehensive income. So my question is just this: do you think that investors are not properly understanding the 3-engine architecture? And if they are, you agree that they are not, what can we do to close that perception gap?
Well, thank you for the question, Jeff. Last year, and Jeremy and his team have been candid about this. We've performed at less than wonderful levels in some aspects of the insurance engine, despite performing spectacularly well in many other parts of the insurance engine. But if you look at it at the level of the three engines, think about the idea of a football team. And on a football team, you have an offensive team, a defensive team, and special teams. And the record comprehensive income from 2023, I would draw the analogy, that was winning the game. So we won, but we won by 6 points, and special teams scored 2 touchdowns on punt returns. So you won, but it was not balanced, and you don't think of it as being replicable in the way that you would if the contribution from the offense and the defense and the special teams was a little more balanced. So I think the market had some concerns about the fact that insurance, which is our legacy business and the largest single business we're in, underperformed and worked through those issues, and they just didn't give credit for how well the special teams played. That being said, it's better to win than lose, which we did. And I think the stock market reaction, and this is very short term, to our first quarter results was to some degree a sigh of relief that, okay, the offense is playing more like it should, the defense is playing like it should, and the special teams are playing like they should. So I think the number one way in which investors will come to appreciate and understand what this business is worth is by us performing. And if we never had this meeting and never did anything but the bare minimum of filings, but performed extraordinarily well, the market would figure that out. And if we don't perform, no matter how much fun this is, and no matter how much we communicate, and no matter how much we try to break down the components, the market's not gonna love that either. So the number one thing we need to do, and we're well on the way of doing so, is improving the performance. And that I feel pretty good about. Thank you. Zone 2.
Hello, this is Chris Freed from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've been a shareholder since 2021. My question is, I view Markel currently as where Berkshire Hathaway was roughly 1984, 1985. And I'm wondering, what's your vision / plan to execute in order to get Markel up to the next level?
Well, Chris, welcome from the city of brotherly love. And in terms of your vision that we would continue to follow that path, I will say from your mouth to God's ear, that would be a good thing. And basically many of the things that Berkshire did over the years to accomplish the things it did are indeed the same things we are doing now. So first off, and really what attracted me to Markel, and I proudly wear my since 1986 shareholder pin. So at that time, I was working as a stockbroker / an analyst at Davenport & Company here in Richmond, and Davenport was a small member of the syndicate that took Markel public. And I can remember in 1984, I had read the Fortune magazine article by Carol Loomis about Buffett. And I was so stupid at the time. I remember reading it and going into the boss of the department and saying, "Hey, Joe, have you ever heard of this guy, Warren Buffett?" And he says, "It's Buffett, you idiot," and he threw me out. But that instantly crystallized in my mind what if you took a specialty insurance operation that was dedicated to making an underwriting profit. And by the way, that was unusual at that point in time because interest rates were so high that if you had an insurance operation and you collected premiums and you were able to hold them for a year or 2 or 3, you could just collect the interest income on the money and make overall profitability that way. Markel, because we are doing things other people won't do and bring intellectual capital to solving somebody's problems as well as just financial capital, has always been dedicated to the idea of making an underwriting profit. And even in last year when our combined ratio was 98, that means every dollar that came in, 2 cents of it stuck to the ribs of underwriting profit. And we've always had the mindset of investing it with a long-term time horizon. So the bones were there from day one. And Steve Markel was the architect that had created and demanded that set of profitability and the willingness to invest longer term in equity securities. So basically every day since then, we've been following that recipe and doing those things. We focused on investments all the way along. In 2005, we started Markel Ventures because we had the opportunity to buy controlling interest in a non-insurance business for the first time. So we're just running the play of the playbook that was laid out, and if we keep running it well, it's been our observation that the world keeps showing us opportunities, and things keep, the phone rings with people wanting to know if we would like to take part in something or help with something or invest in something. And I have no idea what that's going to be tomorrow or a year or 2 or 5 years from now. But history has shown that if we keep doing the things we're doing, we will have more opportunities than we know what to do with. Thank you. I'm going to go to Zone 3. Tyler?
There was a lot of questions about the state of competition in the insurance business. Similar questions from Paul Saunders, Ethan Tucker, an individual shareholder since 2011 from Maryland, and this specific question from Nicholas Appello from High Sage Ventures in Boston. He asked, could you talk about the state of competition for the insurance business versus other best-in-class operators like W.R. Berkley, RLI, Kinsale, who have grown faster while generating better profitability in the last 5 to 10 years? How do you compete on talent, tech, distribution, and underwriting versus these peers?
Well, since that relates to insurance and it's a really hard question, I'm going to toss it to Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be with you. So there's a lot to probably unpack within that question as far as just the general state of competition within the specialty insurance marketplace. So when you think about a quote-unquote sort of best in breed, you're thinking about maybe as a peer comparative to Markel on the insurance side. You still have to do a little bit more work there, because the reality is that each insurance company is organized and operates a bit differently. What their product offering is, where they trade in the world, the types of businesses or platforms they have, the distribution that's considered, the path to sort of customers and even customer segmentation. So even, Tyler, some of the names that you would have mentioned there, each of those businesses is a little bit different than what we have. We are a collection of capabilities, and I think in some ways we've assembled the broadest array of capabilities for thoughtfully and strategically and efficiently matching risk and capital. When you think about having a U.S. specialty insurance company that can trade from in multiple sort of channels, multi-distribution strategy. We serve the needs of small commercial, small customers, all the way to large risk-managed accounts. We trade in the largest placement hubs in the world, the US, Bermuda, London, Singapore, Munich, many places. We have our international insurance operations. We have a reinsurance platform. We have the largest program services operation with State National. We have insurance-linked securities with Nefila. So some of the other businesses you might compare Markel to, I don't know that they necessarily have the same complement of capabilities. And one of the things I think that also creates some distinction for us that we're trying to continue to tap into, and I think it's going to be a big part of the story of where we go over time, is that collection of capabilities, our culture, and that system of values that we talk about that binds us. We're an incredibly collegial operation. We're an incredibly collaborative operation. We have the ability to partner across platforms, across channels, across the globe to sort of create the best solutions we can for our customers. I think that's distinctive. So I think many of the companies that you might compare us to would find it perhaps more difficult in that space. I think when you think about distribution, multiple channels, we trade across a wide array of distribution channels. We are proud to be a multi-distribution channel. I think that's a competitive advantage longer term. Technology, we've spoken about that to a degree, and our technology stack is divided and segmented in many different ways. What it looks like to trade in SME business in Germany from a technology standpoint is going to look different than large shared and layered risk managed accounts that we're going to trade in US and Bermuda. And so we have to have technology solutions that address the full complement of what we do. We have a technology roadmap. We have a vision in that space. We've been implementing for years what we're doing, and we really have the rest of the pieces of what we want to be true in that space. Certainly different organizations are going to be at different points in their journey with regards to technology. I think some of that's going to come back to where do you trade, how many channels, your breadth of products, how long you've existed, whether or not you've grown through acquisitions. So a lot there. The insurance space is certainly competitive. I'd also just caution in a way when you pick up a set of numbers on a 90-day increment, I don't think you can just compare two sets of figures and think they're telling you the same story. Different companies have different markets, products, market cycles, and how they approach, if you will, reserving, how they approach margins of safety, how they think about, the inflationary environment we might experience. Any number of things that sort of influence what they even put into the results. So just a caution to do the deeper work, I think, on one set of numbers compared to another.
Let me add 6 quick bullet points to Jeremy's answer, if I may. So first off, I learned, I started out life as a CPA, and then the second thing I did after becoming a CPA was learn to start saying, well, I used to be a CPA, which is much more convenient because you don't have to keep up with the CPE requirements and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things apparently in GAAP accounting, there's a precise definition for what it means for you to say apples to apples. I think if we're talking about things that are not publicly filed financial statements, and we talked about an apples to apples comparison, you all know what I'm talking about, but apparently you can't really say that unless you meet these specific GAAP tests to say it. So I've come to adopt the phrase applesauce to applesauce. So what I think you're looking at when you look at different insurance entities, like some that you referenced, it's an applesauce to applesauce comparison. And let me suggest what I mean by that. So first off, there's the mix of business that you have, about how much property business you write versus how much casualty business you write. And in any given year, Markel will skew more one way or the other. Historically, we've skewed a bit towards the casualty side, but we're a meaningful writer of property risk too, and that is still the case. It's been a good year in property. So some of the companies you would have mentioned would have a heavier concentration, a dose of property mix. Now you can attribute that to management skill and saying, look, we want to heavy up on property, and it turned out to be a good decision to do so. And you could say, well, you guys made a mistake by not emphasizing property last year. Fair criticism, but it makes it an applesauce to applesauce comparison because we're writing different businesses. Workers' comp is another example of how much of that you had in your book and would make a big difference. The second thing is, and we've talked about it, and for readers of our annual report and close followers, we took the big, heavy-duty property exposures, and as opposed to writing them on our balance sheet, using our capital, we, through Nefila and our ILS operations, write the same risk, serve the same customers, participate in the profitability of that, but that'll show up as fee income and service income, not underwriting profitability. So if you're looking at one combined ratio of 95 and another combined ratio of 95, you may think they are the same thing, but they're not, because they have different components, and the profitability we would have would be the 95 and what we made in fee and service income, which in the other entities you mentioned would not be the case. We also have a spectacular international business, which those companies don't have, which would make the comparison, again, more applesaucey to applesaucey. We're also conservative in our accounting and setting the loss reserves. It is an item of religious mantra around here that we set our loss reserves at levels that are more likely to be redundant than deficient. And that means that as time goes by, whatever number we put up for what we thought the loss reserves were going to be, we want the actual number to come in lower and better than that. And for almost every year of our history, in fact, the last time we didn't get that right for a full year was 2004. So we mean what we say about that sort of thing. And then the last point I will make, and this is a karma style point, I am glad, we are all glad, everybody should be glad that those insurance companies you cited and other insurance companies are profitable and make money. That's a good thing. That is healthy competition. The competition that scares me and is really tough are people who are willing to lose money at insurance. That's somebody who's real tough to compete with. And that does happen from time to time. And I can remember, and for those of you who have buttons with a number of years on them from the early days of the Terra Nova acquisition and our foray internationally, and that was some tough slogging there for a while to figure out how to do that. We would look at other companies. We would understand the risks. We would see the prices they were charging compared to the prices we were charging. And we would say there's just no way that can work. But it worked for them for a while until reality asserted itself. And we used to have to comfort ourselves. And believe me, it was cold, lean comfort that didn't seem that comforting at the time, but it was true. We used to say, someday they're going to run out of money to run out of. And that's exactly what happened. And we just had to wait that out. And it is way worse to compete with somebody who is in the process of running out of the money they have to run out of than an entity and an organization that's running a good, solid, profitable business. Thank you. Zone 1.
Hello, my name is Joey Opekin. I've been a Markel shareholder since 2019. The most important value of our company, Markel, is the culture, the Markel Style. Of course, it's been 4 years since COVID struck, but you guys are still using the hybrid model, and Tom, you mentioned this today in the fireside chat, the challenges of adapting to the new generation's view of what the work life is going to be like. How are you guys addressing and evolving to this new generation's view of work life while still maintaining the Markel Style? Thank you.
Thank you, Joey, and I appreciate the question. I recognize this from previous years.
From Andrew, to understand what's going on in the venture space.
Yeah, absolutely. I recognize you as a questioner from previous years in Richmond and in Omaha, so welcome back, and thank you for that question. It's interesting. So, for instance, and Andrew can pick up on this in a minute, in many of the Markel Ventures companies in particular, we have factories. We have operations that are industrial operations. And as the gentleman who ran HAVCO, which makes wood floors, keenly observed, you can't make wood floors at home. So the first week or two of COVID and government-mandated quarantines and whatnot, we had to shut down because we, like everyone else, had no idea of what it was we were dealing with. But we pretty quickly, after pausing, tried to figure out that in an indefinite world like this, we have to figure out how to proceed. And the people of HAVCO and the people of Lansing and so many other industrial, tangible, physical operations, they went back to work. And they showed up in the facilities, which oftentimes run 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And I think the CEOs of those businesses made a wise call. I can't think of any exceptions to this. They said, if we're going to ask our people to be here, we're going to be here too. And that included the office staff. So the change that happened within Markel Ventures, really not so much. They operated similarly before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. In a more white-collar workforce, a more technologically empowered workforce where you have a laptop and you can get a lot of work done remotely. Well, we did that because, again, that was the call that could make the business run and operate and make it all happen. At the same time, as quickly as we could, we tried to open offices safely and provide a welcoming environment where people would be attracted to be with their friends and their colleagues and their coworkers. And different people have different situations, different medical realities, different child care challenges. The supply chain of what it takes to be a working parent got disrupted, among other things. So we try to be thoughtful. We try to be reasonable. We try to be rational. We try to operate in goodwill, and we expect our teammates to operate in a similar fashion. And basically, for most days of the week, I think it'd be relatively indistinguishable about the people we would have inside or outside the office. We've always been a culture of people who are traveling to our client's office and being out there in the field. So operations, whatever normal is, we've been living in it for a couple of years, and we're there now. I don't know if you want to add anything, Andrew?
Yeah, so at the end of last year, the Markel Ventures family, 19 businesses employed 16,200 people. Rough estimate, 70, 80% of those people are as Tom described. Their job doesn't exist in an environment that's not in person. Our friends at Costa Farms have 5,000-6,000 people at peak season demand. They're out working in the field with a handful of folks supporting them in the office, whether it's Cottrell or Havco, Markel Food Group, some of our large manufacturers, Ellicott Dredge. There's just no choice. And so in some ways their change curve was how to live in that environment and how to continue to thrive. What you heard on the radio around back to office and hybrid, it just wasn't relevant. Now we do have businesses that it is relevant for. You take CapTech. Many of you saw a CapTech team speak this morning on AI. Look, CapTech's clients didn't want them in their office. And CapTech can do their work from anywhere. So CapTech chose a different model, and that worked for CapTech. Now, I think they still believe relationships matter. Arguably the most important point in all of this is our companies made those decisions. That's where the decision needs to live. This team up here has a certain way of working. We prefer in office. We spent a lot of time together during COVID. It was tough at first, but then we found ways to make it joyous. But we didn't tell our companies what the right decision was. We encouraged them to think both in terms of what matters right now and what matters forever. And I'm super proud of what they've done. It's an exceptional group of leaders, and they chose to do what was right for their business. And I think they haven't missed a beat.
Thank you. Zone 2. Thank you. Yep,
Good afternoon. My name is Pat Gongson from Washington, D.C. I've been a shareholder since 2008. First off, I would like to thank you for holding the Nefila module this morning to go over more about ILS. As you may remember, I was the one who asked about ILS and more about ILS in last year's shareholder meeting. On a separate topic, my question is about the 2024 proposal that passed regarding executive and employee compensation regarding shares. My understanding about the past was that employees and executives could purchase shares at a 10% discount, and it was implied that the discount was absorbed by Markel and that there would be options for a 3% loan to pay off the balance. Can you please help me understand how the 2024 proposal is different or similar to what existed prior?
Certainly. And I'm going to ask Mike to lean in on this.
It's nice of you. And I was through my eyeballs asking Sue. I was sitting on the second row there. When it comes to the employee stock purchase program, I don't think we have made a change from 23 to 24. So I'm not entirely certain what you're referencing. I apologize. I think that 10% discount you referenced is still in place, and that exists. We believe in an ownership mentality, a long-term ownership mentality, and that's not something new to the company. That's something that Steve and Tony and Alan instituted many, many years ago just to encourage our employees to sit alongside you as shareholders.
Mike, I have judges in my ear, and Brian Costanzo and Sue nodding, confirming that there have not been changes below the executive level. Now, some of the changes that happened at the executive level were driven by Sarbanes-Oxley and regulations and things that named executive officers have different rules that apply to us, the rank and file. But the spirit for everybody is we want people to be owners of this business. We want people to be members of the family, and we try to meet people halfway and encourage long-term ownership positions for people who are working here as part of their daily deal. Anything to add? Okay, thank you. Tyler, zone 3.
This next question comes from Brian McCauley, a longtime shareholder from Broad Run. I saw him here in his 20-year or 20-plus button, and this is about Markel Ventures. On the eve or approaching the 20th anniversary of Markel Ventures, Brian asked, any lessons learned in Markel Ventures and how that informs future acquisitions? And then more specifically, he asked, what kind of return on investment, IRR, return on equity on Markel Markel Ventures inception to date, and expectations you have about future such returns could you provide?
I'll start off with a few comments and then invite Andrew or Mike to chime in, since we've all been partners in this almost from day one. In terms of lessons learned, it's hard. Anybody can say this, but it's harder to do than it is to say. And one thing I would distill, and this is something that I would not have known 20 years ago, is that if you look at a business and you see somebody running a business and think, boy, that's great, well, you should disaggregate that and break it down a little bit. Because I've come to appreciate there are three distinct, different skills on display. One is the skill of running a business. And if you're running a business, you're a business person, and you're meeting your payroll and you're taking care of your customers, hats off to you. That's hard. And I admire the people who can do that at any scale at which it's done. But that's the skill of running the business. The second skill is scaling a business. So if you have a business that has one location and you have 4 employees and you're doing well, great. But if you're going to move from 1 location to 10 locations to 100 locations, that is a different skill than running a business. And then the third skill is once you're at the 100 locations and beyond, there's running a business at scale. And that, yet again, is another discipline. So I would say some of the things that we did early on, I did not appreciate that differential. So I learned it as I learned most things, i.e. the hard way. And those have informed subsequent decisions that we've made. As to the rates of return, for instance, and I should have brought this up in an earlier question, on that slide 2, where I talked about the way I think about the intrinsic value of the business, the 5-year number where the data starts to become real and robust, the compound annual growth rate per share on the investment portfolio that gets marked every day at 4 o'clock, that's 11% a year. The operating income buckets over those 5 years were at 25% a year. And if you weighted average combine those over the last 5 years, that intrinsic value calculation, of which Markel Ventures would be a big doggone part of it, is roughly 15% a year for the last 5 years. That is a wonderful rate of return, and I'd be happy to sign up for that sort of return forever. That will put us in the pantheon of superstars if we can continue to compound at the kind of rates we have so far. Andrew or Mike, anything you want to add on that?
I'll add a couple things. On the lesson learned, I'd say I'd encourage you to find Ken Newsom here afterwards, because I think every mistake we've made in 20 years, we've made with Ken. He started with us. I wasn't even here yet, but I heard of some of the early mistakes, and I've made some during my 12 years. But look, we're learning, we're adapting. We don't have it all right. I think about my partner, Peter Partee, who's on the team now. And when we step into a process, whether one of our businesses is looking to buy a company or we might be involved in some discussions ourselves, working with Peter, we're better than we've ever been before. And we don't have to tell Peter all the lessons learned. He's got his own over a multi-decade career in which he's done investing at other places outside of Markel. So the list is long. It should be, and we'll continue to add to it. I think there's some things we've learned around businesses that work well in our system and businesses that don't. And we try to stay disciplined around that. There's questions as to why we may not have bought a business in the past few years. Lots of reasons, but we want to find businesses that work well in our environment and where we are the best home for those businesses. So the lessons learned line up in that way. And on the returns front, look, I think they've been good. I think they've been really good, and that's a credit to the 19 leaders that run our companies. Sure, we're the ones who ultimately make the decision to invite them into the family, but they're the ones who do the work every day. It's incredible what our group's done. Super proud of all of them. I'd love to name all of them right now, but most of them are in the arena. I hope you find them at the reception. But they've done a great job, and they've provided very good returns to you all as shareholders.
Mike?
I'll add, agreeing with all that, and maybe add one more, and I'll take advantage of your question, if you don't mind, to add my own thanks onto that, which was expressed so well by Tom and so beautifully, and Steve's remarks as well for Alan. And I have a personal reason to do that, and I'll I had the opportunity 3 years ago to tell Alan, thank you for personally bringing me into this company 18 years ago. And all that was said about him has been true. What have we learned about Ventures? When Alan invited me to walk in the front doors of the building at 4521 Highwoods Parkway, where I still sit today, I fell in love with this company. It didn't take me a full day. I don't think it took any of us a full day. Why? We have 214 words in the Markel Style. We talk about the style. I think in some ways that overcomplicates it. It was a place that loved to win and just wanted to be decent while they did it. It's not harder than that. Just be kind, but have fun winning. And I loved that. Unbeknownst to me, on the day I walked in that front door, Tom had launched this experiment in the background. And the experiment was this. Can we go find other businesses who share that same set of values and invite them to join the party, or invite us to join their party, however you want to think about it, and can we become stronger together if we do that? And it was complicated because some of those businesses did entirely different things than what our core business was. And in effect, that was the experiment that was Markel Ventures. What have we learned in almost the 20 years of doing that? It works. It works. It doesn't work perfectly. It isn't always easy, but it's magnificent. And the power of that idea, I feel like I'm giving an infomercial when I talk about it. It's very profitable. It's defensible. It's unique. And it's extremely needed in the world. This idea of having a long-term home for businesses that want to win and win the right way. It is an incredible thing. There is no fault in that idea. If we mess this up, to the question about where does the company go in the next 10 to 20 years, if we mess this up, it's not the idea. It's the people. Tom talked about the performance of the engines. The beauty of, and insurance is so large and still a cornerstone of the business in every single way, that if it has a bad year or two, it's going to be very evident. It's not the only business that struggled in 2023 for sure, but the beauty of having multiple businesses together, committed to winning together, cheering each other on when things are great, cheering each other on when things aren't tough. It is a magical thing. It's a dream you had 18 years ago, and what have we learned? It's working.
Thank you. And one additional adjective I would add to your list, it's replicable. This is a business that is now at scale, and it can continue to scale because it's values driven, and those are universally applicable. Point number one. Point number two, in referencing Alan, and I'll ask for your grace and remind you of the sense of humor bit, is Alan, in his encouraging way, when something went wrong, he would say, you know, it's okay to make a mistake. Now, please don't keep making the same dumbass mistake. But that has grace for making the mistake, but it also means don't quit. Don't quit. Keep going.
He said that to us a lot.
We're going to go make some new mistakes. Zone one.
Hi, my name is Amir Golgari. I am been a shareholder for a while. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and was hoping, in the spirit of inverted thinking, if you could give us an example of an investment you could have made or a business you could have bought that you knew enough to do and it made financial sense, but you didn't do it for reasons, for culture or executive, something that wasn't financial. Thanks.
Well, one story comes to mind, and I can't name the company, but I'll tell you as much of the story as I possibly can. And that was, Markel Ventures back in 2013. So we'd been at it 8 years, and we were going down the path. Andrew already knows where this is going. There was a deal that came up, and I completely fell head over heels in love with it. And it was a great business. It was a fun business, and I still see their product and services many times today. And no matter where I am and when I see it, I take a picture of it and usually message it to Andrew and Mike and just show a picture of a tear in my eye. Now, the reason we didn't do it is because that was the same moment almost that we did the Altera deal. So we were faced with, look, you can do one or the other, but we can't do both. And Steve was the hanging judge at that particular time, making that particular call. So I whined for a while and cried and stomped my feet, but I realized that he made the right call. So today, for example, if it comes up, there's a certain amount of bandwidth and capacity that we have to buy anything, and that's both financial and just human. Time, hours, team, the ability to spend the appropriate amount of time on something. So that was a case where there was an insurance company deal and a ventures deal that were coming in at home plate at the exact same time. Steve made the correct call to say, we're going to do the insurance one, and we can't do both. Now, the good news about buying an insurance entity, and this was an insurance underwriting entity, not an insurance services entity, is that when we spend our money to buy it, well, the insurance underwriting entity has an investment portfolio there, which then subsequently gets there. So it's a two-step process, but we still have the money after we do an insurance underwriting deal. And so they're going to win every tie for that reason, because then with just a small time delay, we'll be able to do the non-insurance deal. Now, in the time that existed between us closing the Altera deal and having everything all set to do the other deal, some other lucky bastard bought that business. Well, so it goes, but we're all right. Andrew wants to chime in here.
So Captech spoke this morning, and when they were speaking, they were talking about news articles from 8 a.m., so breaking news as they were on the panel. Breaking news, there's a tourist that bought that business, right? They're not going to own it forever.
Don't say too much.
I'm not. I'm just simply saying that business will be for sale again.
Okay, yeah.
That business will be for sale again.
Perfect. There you go. Life is long, and we're patient and wait, and Andrew is correct. There are things, and speaking of that particular patience, so for instance, Captech that you referred to, and VSC, the first conversation that we had with those companies until the time of closing was 6-7 years, respectively. So we are patient. We build relationships with people, and sometimes the timing doesn't work, but if the relationship is there, the time is your friend, and it will work, and it will show up. So I'm happy to hear that breaking news, and I volunteer to go back in the trenches to work on that deal. Absolutely. All right, where are we? Zone 2. Thank you.
Hi, Tom. Brian Gehring from Richmond, Virginia, Markel shareholder and employee of Markel Ventures. You have said many times over the last few years, including today, that we are building one of the world's greatest companies. And my question is, how do we know when we get there? And what are some other companies that you would consider great?
Well, thank you, Brian, and I appreciate your commitment to Parkland and Markel. I can remember the instant when you and I first met, and you agreed to join us, and thank you for doing so. In terms of when we will get there, the precise answer to that is never. That's not a journey that finishes, but we're playing an infinite game. And the actual playing of the game itself every day, that's what's fun. And that is what's great. And we've talked about it in the annual report, that the idea of win-win-win, which we talk about all the time. I met a jaded New Yorker who talked about, he was sort of pushing back on that idea of win-win-win. He says, that means I win 3 times and you lose. So a slightly different definition of win-win-win. But what we mean when we say win-win-win is we want customers who deal with us to win, to feel better off because of the product or service that they bought for us, that took care of some need or want that they had, and we did it well enough and at a fair enough price that we earned a fair financial return, and they were happy with what they got and want to do business with us again and refer people to us. And I can think of no better organization within Markel than the one you work for that lives by that ethos and the turning inside out that you and your colleagues do every day to help people that the world isn't really helping very much. I could not be more proud of what you do, and that stands as a testament for how that works. We want you as a colleague to win, and we want you to have the ability to, as Alan said in the style, reach your highest potential. Be creative, learn, laugh, have fun, enjoy the people that you work with. And I know you well enough to know that works well. And in the context of doing all that, we want the shareholders, the capital providers, to win as well, which means we earned good returns on the capital you gave us to do these things. And I think our 5-year numbers and our 35-year numbers would support the fact that we're doing that as well. There are other companies that we admire as well. And for instance, as an example, one of them didn't used to be part of Markel, but then it did become part of Markel Group. And I think of Lansing and the culture and the way in which Lansing operates, that has been a valuable addition to the DNA of the Markel Group. And we've learned so much by being associated with Lansing, and things like the employee survey and the employee pulse kind of things that we do. I mean, obviously we were doing some of those, but when we saw how Lansing did it, we took our game up a notch because we thought the Lansing team and Lansing did it better. So there are examples of people who do it extraordinarily well in so many ways, winning companies, and we're always on the lookout for them. Thank you. Zone 3.
Yes, the next question comes from Denny Jaspers, who's here all the way from the Netherlands. He asked, imagine you, Tom, the CEO of Markel, awaken after being frozen for 40 years, stepping back into the world and the company you once led. What question would be at the top of your mind for your team?
I think, where's the coffee? I come up with first. Well, the way I would actually answer that, and I can remember this. So here's one of my goals, and this is a silly goal, but it's a goal nonetheless. You know, I was out in Omaha for the 34th year in a row a month or so ago at the Berkshire meeting, and I was reflecting to myself, and I've spent a fair amount of time in Omaha and Nebraska, different things, and it's a wonderful place, and there's just this great ethos and culture that exists out there. And I'm thinking, if I was 40, 50, 60 years old, and I was in Omaha, and I was in business, and I was a successful business person, and I had lived in Omaha, Nebraska all my life, I would be embarrassed not to own some Berkshire stock. I mean, how can you miss it? It's right under your nose. So I think about Richmond, and I think sort of what we're doing. And I will tell you, so the first stock I bought was at about $8 a share. And by the time I got to 30, and this is a small town, and you go to cocktail parties and you see people. I can remember people at cocktail parties saying, oh, that's great, but I missed it. I missed it when the stock was $30 a share. And as best I could, I would try to respond politely. I would say, you know, all of the same people who were working at Markel from 8 to 30 are still working there every day. We might not be done. It could go further. Now, as it's gone from 30 to 1,600 or whatever, what I would say, perhaps not all of the same people, because time does take a few of us out over time, but all of the same values are going to work every day. So it's not over. So if I was in a time machine and woke up 40 years later, what I would do is look for the Markel Style lucite. And I would start to try to find signs that even though the people who were in those buildings and offices and factories and plants and farms probably are different people, I would try to sniff and discern and ask questions to see whether the same values were there. And if the same values were there, I would say, great, tell me what I've missed, and let's go. And if the same values weren't there, I go, not so good. So, hope that answers this question. Thanks for coming from the Netherlands. Zone 1.
Hi, Mackenzie McCarthy. I'm shareholder for 6 years. What are our plans, both short-term and long-term, to utilize the power of AI to evolve and propel ourselves forward in this industry?
Thank you. I'll speak very briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Jeremy, because oftentimes that question tends to be oriented towards the insurance business, but I would say it applies through every ventures company as well. And again, Captech did a presentation this morning who are aggressively trying to help others, as well as themselves, utilize the tools of AI. In its broadest brush sense, AI is a tool, and it is a tool in a long list of tools that have happened ever since the Bronze Age. We, as human beings, are creative. We come up with new things. We come up with new tools, and what those tools do is they make things better, they make them faster, and they make them cheaper. So this is just the latest iteration of that, and we have our friends and colleagues and teammates at Captech to help guide us specifically. We have IT professionals within each of the businesses that are represented here, and we are fully embrace the idea that these are things that we need to become masters at and use going forward.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, within the context of our insurance operations, I mean, a couple things I would share with regards to AI and generative AI, even more specifically. So, I don't know all the ways that AI is going to shape sort of the lives that we exist in and the way that we work in the coming years, but I am incredibly highly confident that it is going to shape the future of the way that we work. And it is different from, I think, some of the more recent fads around technology, so blockchain or RPA or things along those lines. We look at AI within insurance and we break it into a couple different sort of buckets. One, we want to think about sort of in a way, the governance or risk management, the ethics and responsibilities of using and leveraging those tools. We think about how AI could impact even our traditional products, our traditional perils. Second sort of bucket we really think about is how we can take advantage of third-party software providers and partners that operate in scale, have made significant investments, and where can we immediately benefit from taking advantage of the advancements in those organizations that are readily available already within our technology ecosystem and infrastructure. So as a great example and a little bit of a plug for CapTech, and there was a panel earlier, there were some references to the fact that we at Markel are also customers and clients of CapTech, and that's a great example of a partnership that exists that we've been looking at how we can at scale roll out some solutions that is in our employees' hands, even in my own hands that I'm using, driving productivity and efficiency. Incredible lift there. There's ways that's going to affect software engineering and desktop engineering. There's ways that's going to affect just our everyday working patterns to make jobs and productivity easier. We then get into the exciting things about productivity overall. And as a next step from there, we start to think about proof of concepts and sandbox experiments and things that we're doing right now in the space of underwriting, claims, and reinsurance, where we're redefining workflow. And in many ways, we're driving productivity and efficiency, enhancing insights, and seeing real-world live examples of how we can improve sort of our operations. So I think there's a tremendous upside. We're quite sort of bullish across our insurance operations of what we'll do in that space, and we'll probably report more over time.
Thank you. Zone 2.
My name is Jonathan Strickland with Fort Washington Investment Advisors. I'm a shareholder personally and professionally since 2021. I'm very grateful to the company for holding the event. As I look through the arcane subject of your statutory filings over a number of years, it would appear to me that perhaps the relative loss picks within your casualty lines of businesses declined fairly steadily over a multi-year period, say from 2016 to 2022. And given the attention and focus from the investment community on reserves, particularly within the last 12 months, I was hoping that maybe you might address the thought and decision process behind that, and then maybe more importantly, why reserves in that significant line of business for you are more likely to be redundant than deficient today.
Well, you've asked some technical questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian and Jeremy to give you the technical answer, but I am going to jump in on the last one, because why are reserves more likely to be redundant than deficient at Markel? Because that is our core belief and the operating philosophy and value by which we run the company. And we rely on the subject matter experts to help us get the accounting for that right. But that answer is set, and that philosophy is set first to make sure that's the case. With that.
Yeah, so I'll start out, back to what Tom said, we start our whole reserving philosophy, setting reserves that are going to be redundant. We look at that in a multi kind of layering way in which we do that. We set up a layer of management margin coming out of each year when we set up a new year. That margin rolls off over time. So what you're seeing in some of those years with takedowns happening early on would have been the management layer of margin rolling off, and that's a natural process that we do every year. What's happened subsequent to that is you roll forward to the periods, after 21, 22, 23, looking back in those older years, 16, 17, 18, 19. The industry as a whole, actual claims have developed more than what was expected. And so we started seeing that in our claims trends the last few years, and we took action here, in 22 and then again in 23, kind of reacting to those claims trends that you would have been hearing about in the broader industry across those casualty lines, professional liability lines.
Yeah, I would just add a couple things there. So more likely redundant than deficient, a very important point. Obviously, Tom has touched upon that a couple times. That is in the aggregate. That is across all of our lines and all of our products. The reality is that sometimes in a given line or product line, we may find a deficiency. We never aspire to do that, and we certainly didn't set out to do that, and that ultimately means something has changed or we got something wrong beforehand. And in the case of the casualty reserves, well, a couple things. So first off, even in 2023, a difficult year, we still have favorable prior year redundancies. And Tom alluded to this earlier. The last time we had adverse development was all the way back in 2004. And that was shortly after the Terra Nova acquisition. We were a much smaller company, and just a couple pockets of adverse development sort of swung into a total sort of situation there. We haven't seen that since that time, and especially at the sort of the scale and the volume that we have as an organization today. So we think about that. Now, within casualty, that's still in professional lines. Those are still large portions of our portfolio. And I've certainly commented in the last couple of quarters and over the course of the last year about some of the things we were facing. Some of that, back to is it something that you didn't get right up front, or is it something that we sort of changed on us? The reality is both things occurred. So we have seen the impacts in our portfolio of the rising levels of inflation. We've seen the impacts of the rising levels of social inflation, right? We've seen sort of even post-COVID, courts being closed, and now going into settlement, more aggressive tactics by the plaintiff's bar. The impact of litigation financing, the elevated levels of cost of handling and adjusting claims that were just at levels that we couldn't have reasonably anticipated. Not unique to Markel, but Markel has a greater propensity of casualty and professional lines within our overall portfolio. There's also things about how the mix of our portfolio and maybe the way that we were thinking about limits or attachment points or just good old-fashioned underwriting that we would look at and have looked at and said, we didn't do that as well as we would like to. And so we learn. But across the portfolio in total, it was still more likely redundant than deficient, and we were still favorable last year.
Maybe I'll make one last point, and that is to the point of Schedule P as the source of that. That's only going to represent our U.S. product lines that we write on U.S. paper, admitted paper, E&S paper. So that's not going to represent the lines that we write in Bermuda, and it's not going to represent the lines that we write internationally, either on our German paper or on our UK paper. I think you would see, if you looked at us on an aggregate basis, we've actually seen some favorable development in those product lines, particularly in the professional side, but that's been more in our international lines, which has got different trends, different kind of impacts of things like social inflation, not as prevalent in those lines as it has been in some of our U.S. businesses.
And I'm sorry, I'll make one last point, and then we'll move on.
Once you get started talking about actuarial stuff and losses, it's really hard to stop.
I do want to make one more point. Just so there's no doubt in the audience, if you haven't been following closely, we took a really in-depth review and look at this in the fourth quarter last year, and we hit that. We looked at over $4 billion of reserves. We really got our best and brightest across the company. We complemented that with third-party insights and data. We did a really ground-up review. So we have tried to take that, and that would have been reflected in the stat filings as well.
Thank you. Jeremy spoke of the technical matters, as did Brian. I would say in layman's term, we gave it the Larry David eye. Zone 3.
I'm going to take the liberty to pair two questions together here. The first from Chao Zhang from Think Well Wealth Advisors, a shareholder since 2023 from Allen, Texas, and one from Patrick Silp. The first one, to help us better understand what Markel Ventures looks for, can you discuss one or two past acquisitions, talking about what makes it a good business and what allows it to win against competitors in its industry? And then the second question is, please share the long-term strategy for Markel Ventures. Does the Markel Group envision it becoming a dominant engine?
Thank you. I'll take the first stab. I'll invite Andrew to chime in if he would like to at all. The first is, we've, for many, many years, and it's been written about in the annual report, we have a four-step process when we're considering making an investment in an equity security. And that means an ownership stake. So equity security, sometimes people's minds jump immediately to publicly traded equities, but buying a business in itself is buying an equity security. And what we look for are good businesses with good returns on capital that don't use too much debt to do it. That's step one. Number two, management teams with equal measures of talent and integrity, because one without the other is worthless. Three, that have the ability to reinvest the money they make or capital discipline to push it back out through either further acquisitions or dividends or share repurchases. And four, at a fair price. That catechism has been written in the annual report for at least 20 years, if not longer. And while it started out as a description of what we look for in the purchase of public equities, it is exactly the same discipline that we look for in the purchase of Markel Ventures companies as well. And that discipline has not changed in decades, and I do not expect it to change going forward. So that is the first part of the answer to the question. In terms of the size of Markel Ventures relative to the Markel Group at large, there's no strategic vision or goal or proportion or ratio that we have in mind. We look at every day as a fresh set of thinking about the 360 degrees of freedom of action we have to allocate capital, which is a unique advantage within our architecture of the Markel Group. And if we see a bunch of ventures deals that make sense, we're going to do them. Apparently, as Andrew says, I'm going to be working on a new one starting tomorrow. If it's on the insurance side, we do that, or we buy back our stock, and we really are, indifference, not the right word, because that doesn't carry the sense of, we're ecumenical when it comes to where that is going to be. And our strategy is, my two colleagues here have MBAs, I don't. And in MBA terms, when I try to connect with them, I describe our strategy as buying assets that produce cash, and we use that cash to buy more assets that will produce more cash. That's the strategy. You can add any MBA color to that if you like. Apparently, they're going to pass.
I feel like I'm doing myself a disservice if I speak, but I will. Pick a business. We've said CapTech a lot today, but I think those that were here this morning got a little taste of the quality of that company. And I remember in 2015, after many years talking about CapTech, what makes it a good business? Well, we need it, right? How many people were on the edge of their seat listening to the AI discussion, just trying to get a little sense of what they can be doing in their personal and professional lives with AI? CapTech are the folks that teach you how to do that. That makes that a good business. What allows it to win? People like CapTech. The people that work there love it. When you go talk to CapTechers, you ask them, what have they done in their careers? They say, I've worked here, I've worked there, I've worked there. I've usually moved the best opportunity, and then I found CapTech, and I stayed there. And so the ability to recruit and retain exceptional people has made that company very special over its near 3-decade history, and they've done phenomenally well in our family. And to the strategy point, I can't add much. I don't know what's next. There's a question about mistakes. We'll make more of those, but hopefully do more good things than bad, and it'll add up to a great number and a great result long term.
Thank you. Well, we're coming up on 2 hours, and I appreciate the questions. We'll do one from Group 1 and one from Tyler, and then we'll go outside and continue the after party of the Schedule P discussion. So with that, Zone 1.
My name is Denny Poulin. I'm an investor from Pittsburgh. Thank you for hosting us, and also wanted to say thanks for hosting the Nefila ILS panel this year. Related to that, I had a question on the fee structure for the institutional investors that participate in that business. Just if you could just speak to it in a general sense, and then also just the whole idea of having a permanent capital base with insurance. Are there redemption features or like gating requirements for the institutional investors that participate in that business?
Certainly, I'll ask Jeremy to chime in on the details of this, but Denny, thanks for coming back. I remember meeting you last year. So thanks for making the trip from Pittsburgh again. Jeremy will speak to the fee structure of Nefila in just a minute. We might be mixing up a little bit of things in terms of the concepts of permanent capital and what's happening at the Nefila level. Within the Markel balance sheet, and this is the Markel Group, not just the insurance company, we think of the capital as permanent. And again, get back to that notion that I talked about of that investment portfolio, and as long as we remain profitable and don't shrink, well, all that capital earns returns for the benefit of the shareholders, and whether you want to call it permanent, unbounded, indefinite, whatever, eternal, all of those things are true. But that really describes the capital base of the Markel Group writ large. Nefila has customers who sign up for a voyage, annual years, something along that line, and they are essentially money managers, skilled managers, who charge fees to manage those assets in the way a money management firm would. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy to pick up any details on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't add a whole lot to that. There are different, ultimately in Nefila, we have different vehicles that have different strategies and offer different return profiles, and we work with different types of institutions. So even at the panel earlier today, if you were there, Frank Majors would have been talking about early days, pension funds, endowment funds, one type of structure with one type of vehicle. Some of the things that we're doing now, hedge funds, PE funds, those types of investments in some of those vehicles look a little bit different from a fee structure standpoint. So it all sort of depends on the services that we're providing and sort of the return profile and the needs and the returns that the investors are looking for. We gave some examples earlier, and maybe one point of clarification. Markel at large doesn't invest specifically in Nefila. Obviously, Nefila is a business that we own within the wider Markel Group context. On the sort of redemption point, again, it's contractual, and different investors in different classes with different fund strategies are going to have different terms and conditions around when and how they can redeem and signal redemption. And one of the bigger things that was it impacted adversely the wider ILS space in recent years, elevated levels of catastrophe activity. We heard this idea of trapped capital. So you were an investor, there were losses, the collateral had to be set aside, it was taking time for those losses to pay out, and as an investor, you wanted an exit, you wanted a liquidity solution. And so that is an example we talked about earlier of we could partner between Markel's resources and capabilities and appetite and Nefila's capabilities today. How can we simplify, all these different sort of funds over different years around different events and this big pot of collateral that actually maybe we could do something to simplify that administratively. So that was a way to facilitate a better exit and redemption and liquidity experience for the investors that actually then was a good return for investors and a way to put money to work to then generate more fee incomes within that structure. So a lot of that is just sort of contractual. I hope that helps.
All right, and given the time, Tyler, we'll turn to you for the last question of the evening.
I'm going to send it over to this other zone. We got one more shareholder.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Jefferson Lilly from San Francisco. I've been a Markel shareholder approximately 5 years. Thank you all for your hard work. And I've been for a decade investing limited partner capital in mobile home parks. So I'm particularly interested to hear a little bit about how you all are allocating capital, perhaps for homes, CapEx, acquisitions, et cetera, into your mobile home park division. And related to that, curious to know if you guys would ever consider acquiring a portfolio of parks for stock.
Well, thank you, Jefferson, for the question. I do know of your role in the industry. and I think you're probably pretty familiar with ours as well. We have made portfolio acquisitions for cash from time to time, and they have been opportunistic, and when the market has served up opportunities to us where we thought the cap rates were very attractive and capital wasn't just flooding through the streets as it has been the last few years. We have observed that interest rates in general are higher, and that has made the hurdle rate for every possible acquisition higher, manufactured housing communities included. We have only done a limited number of acquisitions within Markel Ventures in the last year or two. There have been bolt-on acquisitions of companies that are already part of the family. Our phone is starting to ring more. We're hearing and learning about more things that might make sense. And as a fellow Markel shareholder, I would just ask you to take comfort in the fact that we go to work every day, and we are anxious to pursue opportunities when they make sense. And we'll try to make rational decisions when we see the opportunity to do so. With that, we're going to call it. We're going to head outside for the reception.